Hello and welcome to another bonus episode from Backlot 605. I'm your host Brian Mensing, and joining me as always is Derrick. How you doing tonight?
Pretty good, you?
I guess it's been a good weekend. It's been a good weekend for the box office. Finally got a couple new movies.
Yep.
It's because of those movies is what you determined that we are going to be talking about this week. So what is our bonus this week?
So, as we talked about yesterday, Jackass Forever topped the box office by far,
Mm-hmm.
by a substantial amount. And of course, Jackass Forever comes to us from the good folks at MTV Films, who have been providing movies to us in theaters since 1996 with their debut feature, of course, as you love to mention, the Jerry O'Connell cockroach feature, Joe's Apartment. Obviously, that was not a box office hit, but they have had a ton of other box office hits since then, and that's what we're going to take a look at today. Our MTV Films' top 10 box office hits.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. I would like to mention just 'cause I wanted to pull it up here in terms of Jackass doing as well as it is for its opening weekend here. It's already made three times its budget back. So
Yep,
this just goes to show the reason why MTV says, "Oh, Johnny Knoxville wants to make another Jackass movie." Clearly, we're gonna say yes.
yep.
That being said, the top 10 MTV movies at the box office, our number one is not even Jackass. We actually get to talk in regards to a sports movie, a remake, an Adam Sandler movie. We get The Longest Yard at $158.12 million. I'll be the first one to say, as much as I do enjoy The Longest Yard, I did not realize this was a remake until I probably a few years later that I even realized that was the case.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I would have thought that would have been, I mean, because obviously when that movie came out, they made a big deal about, well, Burt Reynolds is in the first one, and we found a way to put Burt Reynolds in here in this new one. So,
I think it's one of those things. I think I was just completely oblivious to it. I guess I don't know why, because yeah, as soon as I realized, I'm like, oh well, that makes sense because I do remember Burt Reynolds being in the Sandler version and whatnot. But all of a sudden, I saw the artwork for the original. I'm like, oh, okay, okay. So, it's funny is that we see this and we're like, okay, so Sandler clearly knew how to be able to make some money for MTV. You would thought that MTV would have tried to hold on to the Sandman for as long as they could, and obviously that didn't work out for them.
well, I mean, I think this was a one-off because again, for the longest time, Adam Sandler, pretty much had his shop set up at Sony Pictures.
Mm,
I think the reason that MTV got involved technically is because the original Longest Yard movie came from Paramount Pictures. So
okay.
obviously they had the rights to the movie, and obviously Paramount and MTV are
Mhm.
both part of the same Viacom family. So
Yep.
that's how they got their foot in the door. And of course, once this was done, Adam Sandler went back to Sony to make it. I even think Sony or Columbia Pictures has like a co-studio credit on this, possibly.
Would
Um,
make sense.
but yeah, the fact that Paramount had the rights to this movie that Sandler wanted to remake is why I think MTV got involved, and not much more than that.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they were because I mean, Sony is going to do everything they can, but nope, you were absolutely correct because I wanted to pull it up just for the sake of curiosity. We got Paramount Pictures, Columbia Pictures, MTV Films, Happy Madison. So pretty much all of
Yep.
the players that you would expect to be attached to this here are clearly attached. So
Yep.
all right. We go in from Adam Sandler to a movie that I have purposely avoided because I'm sorry, it looked horrible. And that is the Will Ferrell, John Heater, Blades of Glory coming in number two, $118.59 million. I will say it. All these sports movies of Will Ferrell's for me personally just look bad. And I understand that I am completely in the minority with this.
Well, here's the deal. I mean, when this movie came out, certainly this was getting to be a repetitive thing because, like, this was 2007, so 2005 was Kicking and Screaming, the
Hmm.
kids' soccer movie. 2006 was Talladega Nights. which is probably the biggest single hit of all his sports movies.
Yep.
And then Blades of Glory was 2007, and then 2008 was Semi Pro, which did horrible at the box office. And I remember it only because like the week after it came out, it was a New Line Cinema movie. And then the week after it came out, New Line Cinema said, like, we are no longer a standalone movie studio and we are getting folded into Warner Brothers. I know it wasn't Semi Pro's fault. It was actually the Golden Compass's fault because that lost a lot of money. But I can't help but tie the folding of New Line Cinema into the failure of a Will Ferrell sports movie. But that's just me.
You know, I do remember how much the Golden Compass had so much hopes and dreams that failed miserably and whatnot. But you know that between that and honestly with this here is probably, I'm going to bang to say that even though it may not have had the sort of impact the Golden Compass did, you can't tell me that wasn't part of the conversation when the execs are like, all right, we need to have a talk.
Yep. Yep. And I will say there are some actually enjoyable things in Blades of Glory.
Hmm.
Because obviously again it's John Heater as they're trying to figure out what they do with this guy post Napoleon Dynamite, but it's also
Yep.
got Craig T. Nelson as their coach. I believe it's Will Arnett and Amy Poehler as like their skating competition. They're like brother and sister, but they are semi incestuous and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's a decent watchable time, but again, it's kind of been forgotten to the sands of time as well.
Yeah. Yeah. There's, I'll say, most people don't talk about Blades of Galore anymore.
No.
Um, Coming in at number 3 is Jackass 3D, $117.23 million. This one is fresh in my brain just because I literally got done watching this thing about 20 minutes ago.
Oh wow.
Um, oh yeah, I will certainly say is in comparison to the other two, I just because I haven't seen Jackass Forever yet here. Um, you can clearly tell, even though that I'm not watching this in 3D, they were definitely, it's 2010, so they're taking advantage of the whole everybody's making things in 3D. Did you get a chance to go see this one in 3D when it was out, or did you just go
Oh,
see it in?
oh, oh yeah. I mean, this was I distinctly remember this. I went to the Century East Theater.
Hmm.
This was the midnight opening on Thursday night with a packed crowd. We all have our 3D glasses, and you're absolutely right. I mean, they definitely took a lot more visual stylization with this movie.
Hmm.
I don't think they actually filmed it in 3D, but I think they did a
There,
lot up converted it.
well, there's a couple of pieces that I can tell, especially like the opening intro.
Yep.
And just before we get to the credits and whatnot, I feel were probably filmed in 3D, but they probably did the conversion of all the antics in between. Is what it feels
Yeah.
like to me, just coming from
Yeah.
somebody who watched it in 2D.
Yeah, and of course they also did a lot more of like the super slow motion stuff in that
Hmm.
installment. So it really upped the visual ante, so to speak. And of course, also because it was in 3D, the ticket prices were much higher on this movie,
Yep.
which really bloats up your box office here, especially compared to the other Jackass movies. So,
Hmm.
I mean, it was an event of sorts, and certainly, again, making this much money on the small budget that they worked with, you know, it made perfect sense why this just exploded out of the gate. So,
No, definitely. Yeah. And as low budget as they are, pretty much they even have a halfway decent weekend and whatnot. They're already in the black, so
yep.
might as well, right?
I
Uh,
believe, if I'm not mistaken, Jackass 3D made $50 million on its opening weekend,
well,
which,
people love the jackasses. That there's no argument there.
yep.
And speaking of that, we go into number 4. We got Jackass Presents Bad Grandpa at $102 million, just a few years later. I will say, I'm intrigued just because I'm taking care of that blind spot that is I never watched a Jackass movie up until the last couple of days. Um, some of the Bad Grandpa skits from the first 3 movies, for me, some of them are hit and miss. There's one of them that is just bad personally myself. How would you gauge this full on your representation in comparison to some of the skits from the first three movies. Does this feel like it's a justified number, or was this just basically bloated because we're still coming off of just a couple years later off of Jackass 3D?
Well, I think there was a lot of curiosity to this because what you have to keep in mind is that Bad Grandpa is actually kind of a quasi, actually has a narrative to it
Okay.
and a plot, because the whole gimmick is like Johnny Knoxville's grandpa character and his, long lost grandson or whatever. They, go on the road. It's a very flimsy plot line that just is the setup for a bunch of like hidden camera gags.
Okay.
And there are some like outrageous stunts, where they've got marks watching on and stuff like that. But it is kind of a curiosity. Again, this is coming right in the heels of like Borat and Bruno and the other Sacha Baron Cohen movies that kind of do a similar thing with mixing in all these hidden camera stunts with a
Yeah.
very thin plot. So I think it was some curiosity just to see like how can they pull this off in the realm of a Jackass type movie. And I think there was even kind of the implicitness of, maybe we're not going to get maybe down the road here going forward, we're not going to get a full blown Jackass movie, but this is probably the closest we're going to get.
Yeah.
And, again, a lot of people still showed up for this. I also remember seeing this in a packed theater on opening weekend here in Sioux Falls. And there were scenes in Bad Grandpa that had the audience losing their minds. Again, part of why I went to see Jackass Forever 3 times this weekend is because they are just great audience experiences if you have a big audience to watch it with. So,
You've piqued my curiosity. All right, so coming in at number 5, actually one of my favorites, and this is definitely a movie of its time.
yep.
2001, Save the Last Dance, coming at $91.06 million. The first one where it's it's not really, it has its funny moments, but this is the first one we've got on our list that is kind of a relatively serious movie. This is just a romantic drama. Um, I myself, like I said, this has been one of my favorites ever since it came out 22 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of forget this, obviously MTV is making a lot of movies kind of really aimed toward its then target audience. And
Hmm.
I do remember this because like this movie came out in January. I remember like that July Scary Movie 2 had like a quick Save the Last Dance parody scene. I
Yep.
know they even had like a thing and then that December was Not Another Teen Movie where Sean Patrick Thomas shows up very briefly in a cameo in that as well. So certainly this movie was a big enough hit where it was like instantly parodied, which is kind of surprising because it again, this is also a little bit of an of the moment movie, but back then it was a huge hit. So and
Hmm.
obviously you know continued to make Julia Stiles a name to be reckoned with in the youth movie market then too. So
Oh yeah, definitely coming off of like 10 Things I Hate About You.
yep.
Definitely. All right. So coming in at number 6, we have the Justin Bieber Never Say Never coming at $73.01 million. I will, knowing that you go see everything in the theater, did you go see Bieber in the
I did not.
theater?
I did not go see Bieber. No. This is back during this time where we just had this onslaught of teeny bopper music documentaries because, like
Hmm.
Disney, they had like the Miley Cyrus Hannah Montana movie, and they had the Jonas Brothers 3D movie. Well, actually, the Hannah Montana one was also 3D. But then you
Wasn't
also
this
had
about
stuff like
the Katy Perry one wasn't around this time?
yeah, that was the next year was the
Okay.
Katy Perry All of Me movie. So these were like this was like a very recurring thing there for a number of years. And obviously, I think the Justin Bieber movie was the most successful one because that was like lightning in a bottle, where he was at peak stardom. Um, to the extent where I know like a few years later they made like another Justin Bieber documentary movie that didn't do as well. Didn't even get a release here in Sioux Falls. But yeah, it was a big deal. Again, directed by John M. Chu. the guy who went on to do such movies as G.I. Joe Retaliation, and Now You See Me Too, and then most recently In the Heights. So,
Let's not forget Crazy Rich Asians.
oh, that's true. That's true. I was
'Cause
afraid you were going to say, don't forget Jim and the Holograms. So,
did I want to bring that up? Yes, but at the same time too, I did want to be like, we went from Justin Bieber to Crazy Rich Asians, to
yep.
basically kind of show you that never judge the guy that made the weird, music documentary thing from here that, isn't still going to make something that's potentially award winning 10 years down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It is a wild career. I will give it that. So,
you know what? I That's one thing I will give John M. Chu absolute credit for is he's gonna make what he wants to make, whether it's a make or break. Because yes, how do you say that the guy that made In the Heights and Crazy Rich Asians is also the same guy that made this and Gem and the Holograms and
yep.
G.I. Joe? You know, you can't argue that man does not have an eclectic, resume for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Coming in at number 7, we have Jackass number 2. I love how this thing is numbered. Or it's literally Jackass number 2. $72.78 million. Um, as I've said it before, is having just seen the first one to the second to the third and whatnot. This definitely shows that they upped the ante from the first one into the second one. So I'm not surprised with the success of the franchise and whatnot that this one has clearly made itself on the list, but it's not quite to the Jackass 3D mark.
No, no. I mean, again, it was up in the ante. If I recall correctly, this is the one that opens with them, uh, with the running of the bulls, which again kind of sets up
Yes.
these very cinematic opening sequences, as if they're really starting to embrace their cinema nature. So, again, there was some great anticipation, and again, this outperformed the first movie,
Hmm.
which you would think for some, it would be easy to think that something like Jackass could have easily been a flash in the pan type of deal. And we'll talk about this when we get to the first movie.
Yep.
But the fact that the second movie actually grew by about $8 million was kind of a sign to all involved and to Paramount, like, we could keep these things going, and they have, and we're all the better for it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And this one, if I didn't feel that the Jackass guys were getting up there in age and doing stuff that would kill a normal human being, like these guys like have to be like cybernetic organisms from the future, because the stuff I've seen, even not even the most recent one, no human being should live through half the shit that they put themselves through.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely not. But they do it, and it is what it is. I mean, I'll just say with regards to the newest movie, you do see several gurney shots. That's
mhm.
all I'm gonna say. So,
I'm guessing the EMTs and everybody are like, yes, we've got a job for like 3 months.
yep.
Coming in at number 8, the Sam Jackson led Coach Carter. We're back into the sports realm. $67.26 million. Um, what I feel horrible about this is that, when this came out and whatnot, I bought this on DVD. I owned this for the longest time. I've never watched this movie, and it genuinely looks like a good, solid sports basketball movie. Um, that I even as somebody who's never seen it, probably doesn't get the love I think it probably deserves.
Yeah, and again, this is kind of in that era where we're kind of really seeing like the resurgence of the inspirational or motivational sports movie. Because
Hmm.
yeah, like Remember the Titans or The Rookie, what or Miracle. I know like Disney would have their own high school basketball movie, Glory Road with Josh Lucas, which was the year after this. And again, Samuel L. Jackson as a high school basketball coach, a tough but fair high school basketball coach. I mean, that kind of sells itself. I should mention, this is from director Thomas Carter, no relation, who is also the director of the aforementioned Save the Last Dance,
Hmm,
keeping in the MTV family, as it were. So,
yeah. Well, good. Coming in at number 9, the original, the Jackass the movie at $64.26 million. Something that, I mean, I haven't looked at the budget for this one here, but this one clearly made its money back easily because some of the shots and everything like that literally looked like they were recorded on camcorders. Like they're like, we
Yep.
don't even have the equipment that we're just handing MTV the VHS tapes.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the budget is listed on Wikipedia as $5 million. So it definitely made that back in its opening weekend already.
Mhm.
Um, and this is kind of interesting because to put this in the perspective of the series had ended like in March of 2002. So this is
Mhm.
actually coming out fairly quickly after the show itself has ended, and they're kind of promoting it as like the kind of like the makeup for not actually having a real series finale on the show, because again the MTV censors were getting much more skittish about things on the show and people imitating it. But they somehow convinced them to let them do this movie, and that probably is the important first step into getting like a durable franchise that continues 20 years later.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. I will definitely say, if there's one thing, not having watched a lot of the show on MTV when it was on the air, um, but just knowing in terms of some of the things that they do in this movie, the language that they use,
yep,
the things that we see that cannot make it to public consumption on broadcast television. Um,
yep,
Honestly, like it's one of those things that was I a huge fan? No. Have I come around to them? Absolutely. This is the kind of thing where even though it does to me does feel like it's a long form episode in theaters at like a strong like 90 minutes kind of thing. These are definitely, I feel, more apt to be more successful as long form in the theaters just simply because they get that a little bit of more liberty. They basically,
yep,
we're just going to be rated R. We know people are going to come. Rated
yep,
R comedies are successful, and that it made sense for this series to leave television and go to the theater.
yep, and yeah.
That is Jackass. And then rounding out our number 10 is Beavis and Butthead Do America, $63.12 million, December of 96. I will certainly tell you, I saw this movie in December. I don't think it was opening weekend because if I remember correctly, this was like mid-December. But for me, this was a Christmas Day release for me. I watched this on Christmas Day.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I believe Christmas was on a Wednesday that year, and it opened like the Friday before. So it was pretty darn close. And I'm definitely sure there were a bunch of families who decided, yeah, we're going to make Beavis and Butthead our family Christmas movie outing because why not?
Hmm.
And it's a great movie. Just the star wattage they got with like Bruce Willis and Demi Moore and Robert Stack and David Letterman. Um, a lot of good folks. Again, a pretty kicking soundtrack on a movie like this.
Hmm.
It was kind of an event. Because this was, if I recall correctly, the show was actually still airing at this point. I think the show ended like a year after this movie came
I
out.
believe you. I believe you are correct. I do believe you're correct. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where it's like, again, I wasn't a huge Beavis and Butthead fan, but there's something about the way that they put this together that it did intrigue me, and I did want to go see this in theaters. And I do remember one of the biggest things about the whole, like you make mention about the cameos.
Yep.
Everybody knew Robert Stack was in there because he's in the trailer and whatnot. They have a lot
Hmm.
of fun the fact that they know they got Robert Stack in there.
Yep.
But I do remember that they were blatantly obvious about Demi Moore, but were being very low key about really that it was really Bruce Willis that was in there. And it wasn't until after the movie came out they're like, "Yep, we really did get Bruce Willis to be in our movie."
Yep. I
Um,
mean,
which, if memory serves me correctly, Because this came out before Bruce Willis did the Rugrats movie, right? Because
That is
Rugrats is
correct.
so
That
you
was
know
2 years
is
later.
yeah. So this is Paramount going. Hey, you know what? Yeah, well, we'll let you be Spike the dog too if you do Beavis and Butthead.
Well, I mean, Bruce Willis had, by this point, he had done quite a bit of voice work because remember, he had done the voice of Mikey in the Look Who's Talking movies, which were
True,
also wildly successful, although not necessarily animation, but still, you
and
know,
not Beavis and Butthead.
nope, nope. But he's doing enough, in that realm. He would do movies later on like Over the Hedge, and I would even, well, uh, I probably shouldn't say that. We probably don't want current day Bruce Willis, in the voice booth. They'd probably pay him like $1 million to say 2 lines, but whatever.
Right, exactly.
And the other thing I'll mention is, again, this is a very good success, and obviously the next movie Mike Judge makes after this, probably due to his clout with the success of this movie, is Office Space. So
Hmm.
this does have some importance in, securing the continued Mike Judge filmography because that leads to Office Space. Office Space leads to Idiocracy, and so on and so forth. And we should also mention we are getting a second Beavis and Butthead movie, but it's not going to be in theaters. It's going to be on Paramount Plus. Regardless, I'm still excited to see it.
Yeah, I would have to sit there and I would have to agree with you on that respect. Something that you have mentioned a couple of times here, something that is clearly, if anybody understands how um, MTV is and how they produce their movies and whatnot, and if I can give it any sort of modern day comparison, again, kind of apples or hand grenades, just simply because of who we're talking about here and whatnot. Is I think of like modern day like James Gunn movies in that, or even Peacemaker series and whatnot. The music is in the forefront of all of these movies. Even the fact that I've never gotten around to watching Coach Carter or Blades and Glory, I'm going to assume, soundtrack wise, they probably have a pretty upfront and in your face soundtrack, because one of the biggest ones I think is like the Save the Last Dance soundtrack. Watching the Jackass movies these last couple of days and whatnot, you can clearly tell that MTV is putting their stamp on. We have all this licensed music we're going to throw at this.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, again, when they're entering the movie market, this is the heyday of the we're going to package 12 different artists and 12 different songs up onto a CD for you to buy.
Hmm.
And that kind of dovetails ultimately into like the TRL era and stuff like that. Um, you know, Obviously not as much of a thing these days. I mean, in fact, MTV Films really isn't making much for actual theatrical movies these days. But
Right.
back in the heyday, soundtracks were still a big deal. So,
Hmm. Now it's all about that playlist. So
yep.
MTV make that. So would you say, just for the sake of Jackass Forever and whatnot, does it have that same feel, or does it seem like it's pulled back since it's been so many years removed?
I mean, there are still a lot of source music on the soundtrack. I mean,
Hmm.
the listing at the end credits goes on forever. Um, you know, Obviously, there's not going to be like any hit singles coming off of this movie, but it does still feel like of a piece with how music is used in those other movies. So,
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that has been the top 10 MTV films at the box office.
did you want to hear the runners up?
Hey, you know what? Let's go for it. I'm
Okay.
curious because I know that the guy that started it all, like Joe's apartment, is like $900,000. Like it's a flash in the pan.
It is actually better than you thought. It made $4.6 million.
Wow.
It is number 33 out of 36 on this list. So
Wow. So just if it's literally the that what what's on the what is 36 out of 36?
okay, so number 34 is the Justin Lin debut feature, Better Luck Tomorrow, which didn't get that much of a release.
No,
But
but that should get a lot more love than it deserved, than it's
and it
gotten.
and it and it has ever since, especially with its quasi Fast and Furious connections.
Yep.
Number 35 is Pootie Tang, which is the based on the character from the Chris Rock show,
Yep.
directed by Louis C.K. And then number 36 is this movie made $1.5 million, but it's a documentary, and it's the documentary Murder Ball about the sport or the guys in the wheelchairs, that did like the competitive
Oh,
basketball
sure.
stuff. So, which again, pretty impressive for a documentary, and certainly getting the MTV stamp on it helped with that.
Oh,
But in
definitely.
terms of the runners up, number 11, one that I'm surprised isn't on this list in retrospect, is Varsity Blues, which you would think would have been a much bigger hit than it was.
Especially for 99. Especially for the time from which that came out. I would have to completely agree with you. I do think that that was one that it just how much did it miss the mark by?
Varsity Blues got to $53 million.
Oh, geez.
So
So at least a solid 10 behind Beavis and Butthead. Okay.
yeah, but again, I mean, like we talked about with Save the Last Dance, it got parodied a lot. Everybody loved to copy the "I don't want your life" line. So
Mm-hmm.
there's that. Number 12 is the 2011 remake of Footloose with 52 million, because yes, they did remake Footloose back in the day.
I don't know what you're talking
Um,
about. It's not a thing.
Number 13 is a movie that MTV bought from Sundance, if I'm not mistaken, and that of course is Napoleon Dynamite.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously they helped bring John Hughes to the forefront. Number 14 is Orange County with Jack Black and Colin Hanks. And number 15 is the original Kings of Comedy, the Spike Lee stand-up movie with like Cedric the Entertainer and Bertie Mac and Steve Harvey. And I'm forgetting was it D.L. Hughley, I think? Yeah, those
Yeah, I
four.
think you're right. Yeah.
So there's that. And then just looking at the list of the other stuff in here, just fun stuff like Britney Spears' Crossroads is number 16. Dead Man on Campus is number 26. Reese Witherspoon's Election is 27. 200 Cigarettes is 32. Again, if you look it up online, it's a really fun list, a pure nostalgia trip, and just kind of a flash in the pan of when MTV was big enough to pump movies into theaters with, regular
Just his
abandon.
name.
So
Yeah. I know. I will I will stand by the fact that if anybody hasn't seen it, go watch Dead Men on Campus. Go watch Zach Morris, not be Zach Morris. And every time I see the guy that plays Cliff from that movie show up in Peacemaker, I just always have a grin on my face. All right. So yes, that again has been our top 10 MTV movies. What do we look forward to next week, Derek?
So next week, we're going to be preparing for the release of a movie we mentioned on yesterday's show, which is the adaptation of Uncharted, starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we have to rip off the Band-Aid and look at the most successful video game to movie adaptations at the box office. It'll probably be an ugly trip, but somebody's got to do it.
It's going to be an ugly trip, and I feel we're going to be talking about Resident Evil a lot.
Not as much as you would think. Yes, it's going to be there, but there are other movies too. I kid you not. So,
All right, good to know. Good, yeah, it's good to know that we're not going to be talking the top 10 video game movies, and 6 of them are Resident Evil. Uh, all right, well, that has been our box office bonus for this week. Be sure to check us out on our main box office episode. We talk about the top 5. Be sure to check us out every week, and we will check you out here next week.
see ya.
Bye.